This week's edition of NJBIA's Minding Your Business is brought to you in part by AT&T, helping family, friends, and neighbors connect in meaningful ways every day. From the first phone call 140 years ago to mobile video streaming today, AT&T innovates to improve lives. New Jersey's community colleges, aligning education to build an innovative workforce. Find out how your business can join and benefit at njpathways.org. And by New Jersey Business Magazine, providing the critical information needs for New Jersey's business community for more than 65 years.
Welcome to NJBIA's Minding Your Business. I'm Bob Considine. Well, Atlantic Shores Offshore Wind is on course to creating the largest single offshore wind project in New Jersey, bringing carbon-free energy to more than 700,000 homes and creating thousands of well-paying jobs. To learn more about this important project, we visited the Atlantic Shores Educational and Community Outreach Center in Atlantic City, and we shot the breeze with Jennifer Daniels and Joris Veldhoven. Have a look. So Jennifer, Joris, it's been now just about a year since BPU awarded the contract for Atlantic Shores Offshore Wind for this fantastic project right off the coast here. What is the scope of this project and what's it going to mean for the state of New Jersey?
Yeah, thanks, Bob, for the question. So we've been developing, as Atlantic Shores, we've been developing this lease area since 2018. Okay. So it's been a couple of years in the making. We're extremely grateful about the award that took place indeed, as you say, last year. So it's for a 1.5 gigawatt offshore wind project. And with the average turbine size for an offshore wind turbine at the moment, around 50 megawatts, that means slightly more than 100 offshore wind turbines.
Okay.
Some other metrics as well to maybe illustrate the size of the project. So in terms of the impact on the state GDP, we're talking about a positive impact on the state of New Jersey of around $1.8 billion. Wow. In terms of sort of guaranteed direct spend, wow, we're guaranteeing around $850 million of direct New Jersey investment in the years to come. And all of that takes place in the next sort of 5-6 years. So we're in 2022 at the moment. So we're going to start up in 2 phases, our first phase in 2027 and then our second phase in 2028.
Got it. And you mentioned the turbines. Where exactly will they be out in the ocean?
So our lease area is located right about 8 to 10 miles off the coast of New Jersey, right out in between Atlantic City and Barnegat Light.
Okay, and you said there was about 100 of them?
Or Atlantic Shores Project 1 will have approximately 100 turbines.
Okay. Yes.
But the lease area that we're describing here between Atlantic City and Barnegat Light has the room for an additional almost 200 additional turbines.
Okay, great. And I'll ask a dumb question, probably several of them, since it's a new science for a lot of people. Those turbines, when they're built, they're not built out in the ocean, correct? They're built on the mainland and then they go out, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. We are working with a local supply chain here to support an EEW facility out of the port of Paulsboro, okay, who will be actually building our foundations for which our wind turbines will sit on top of.
Okay.
So right here in New Jersey, they'll be rolling the steel.
Right. You know, I think people, when they think offshore wind, they've heard of it. You know, it's obviously a growing thing around the country, mm-hmm, and around the world. Yep. But people may not know how it tangibly goes, that energy goes from out there, mm-hmm, to the mainland. Can you put it in layman's terms how this all works?
Yeah. So I can maybe try to illustrate that a bit. So of course, the construction phase itself will take about 3 to 4 years. So right, we're handling big pieces of steel that are the foundations for these wind turbines that Jen just described. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, we have, of course, the turbines themselves, and in between them, there's electrical cables that connect the turbines with each other. Right. And ultimately, that gets connected in what we call an offshore substation. Right. And from that offshore substation, if you like, there's a power cord that goes back to shore and right, brings the renewable power back to the state of New Jersey.
Okay. Joris, you mentioned the mission here for Atlantic Shores is a great investment, both for the economy and for the environment. I'd like to start with the economy, and I definitely want to get to environmental benefits. Mm-hmm. What will this project mean for New Jersey's economy? You mentioned a GDP, but what about jobs?
Yeah, so in terms of jobs, we are going to create over 18,000 full-time equivalent jobs.
Wow.
with the Atlantic Shores Project 1. So that's just the first phase of the development of our lease area. And that takes place over 3 phases. So there's the sort of current, sort of early development engineering phase, which is approximately 1,700 jobs between now and 2024. And then when we start construction, both onshore manufacturing, but also offshore, the actual construction work, that takes place between 2024 to 2027, 2028. That's almost another 6,000 jobs, so FTE, full-time equivalent job years.
Right.
And then ultimately it's the operating phase. So, and that's when a lot of the jobs take place as well, because we intend to operate these turbines for approximately 30 years after they've been installed.
Wow. So we're talking direct jobs and indirect jobs here, sounds like.
Right. So what we do at Atlantic Shores, we like to lead with the direct jobs, because ultimately these are jobs that we directly create. They're contracted by us. And as I said, that's the number, 18,000 direct jobs. What we then also have is, of course, indirect jobs, and even you'll hear some other developers talk about induced jobs. So indirect jobs are indeed the jobs that get created because our suppliers also hire people that hire people that hire people. Yeah. So it sort of continues. And induced jobs, you have to think about, for example, hotels, hospitality, restaurants, et cetera, et cetera. We tend not to lead with those numbers because it's not directly under our control.
Direct, but still, by itself, Atlantic Shores Offshore Wind is doing an amazing job in terms of bringing jobs to the state.
Yep, over 18,000 with our Project 1.
I don't think we mentioned from the start how many homes this is actually going to electrify, I guess is the term.
Yep.
What is the number?
We're talking about almost 700,000 New Jersey homes being powered by offshore wind.
Wow.
And that's just Project 1.
Right.
And so that's just 1,510 megawatts. We'll do that. And as Joris had mentioned earlier, that only takes up about 1/3 of our lease area. So just to kind of put the amount of power that these projects can generate over the long term, if we just look at it on a per turbine basis, they can remove 26,000 tons of CO2 emissions a year. And that's like removing 5,100 cars off the road per year.
Wow, that's amazing. I definitely want to get to the environmental impacts. But we are, at NJBI, we also have a huge focus on workforce development. For a project of this size and other projects in New Jersey that will happen, is there enough workforce to fill that need for what's going to happen in the next 10, 20 years here?
Yeah, if you talk about workforce, you really talk about training and workforce development, of course. I mean, the good thing about a state like New Jersey is there's so much talent, there's so much workforce already there that works on the industry scale projects already. So to an extent, it's about retraining that workforce, and being able to work in offshore wind is certainly doable with some training, and we're working on that together with some community colleges. We're working on that together with the unions themselves. And is that a concern? Of course, because the workforce doesn't yet exist today. But it's something that we know that we can resolve and solve over the next few years together with our partners.
Yeah, New Jersey, NJBI is involved with something called the New Jersey Pathways Project. And one of the big focus is offshore wind in terms of developing jobs and working with community colleges and employers to kind of align with their needs in the future.
One of the other things to add too, we are on the precipice of really launching a new industry. And I think offshore wind has a unique opportunity now to do it right from the first time, to create more equitable opportunity in those underserved, overburdened communities. And it's something in Atlantic Shores we are really committed to doing here in New Jersey.
Yeah, that's great. And I see on the website, the project's going to bring about research opportunities for local colleges and universities. Is this strictly on the offshore wind component? Is it different research projects? What is the connection there?
Well, absolutely. I mean, New Jersey is home to some of the greatest educational institutes and research facilities. So we have been partnering with Rutgers and Stockton University. And, we've been looking at them not only to help us with some of those tough environmental questions, what is this going to do to the environment offshore? How is it going to affect wildlife? So we've been what we see offshore. So we've been engaging at Rutgers University to look at some of our fisheries issues and visibility issues, and Stockton with regard to our reef issues. So we've definitely using them to provide that expert validation and help us identify potential issues early on in our development process, so that we can ensure that we develop our project in a more environmentally appropriate way.
Well, let's talk about the the environmental benefit. This is your mission. I mean, this is really what it's all about. Can you explain in greater detail what it's going to mean in terms of carbon reduction for the state of New Jersey?
So I think what we said is each one of those turbines is 26,000 tons of CO2 equivalent emissions per year.
Wow.
So it's a tremendous amount. But I think what people don't realize is New Jersey is actually feeling the effects of climate change more than any other mid-Atlantic state.
Yeah.
Increased storms, increased erosion, more flooding.
Right.
And we have to make that energy conversion. And projects like Atlantic Shores will help that.
How about in terms of, again, another dumb question, the homes that you're powering, are they coastal homes, or could it be anywhere around the state?
Anywhere around the state.
Wow. How does that work? It's just you're harnessing the energy and deploying it somewhere else?
So we plug into the grid, and then from that place where we plug in on shore, it's distributed across the state.
Okay. So you mentioned, Joris, at the outset, kind of the steps here. What is the next milestone that you guys are looking at to really get this thing moving?
Yeah, so the next milestone is really in about 2 years' time, where we're going to start our construction phase. So that means, as I said earlier, it's about the onshore construction, so manufacturing and assembly, but also the year thereafter, so probably around 2025, we start our offshore construction as well. So that's really the milestone that we're working towards. So how to make sure that we have enough confidence, technically speaking, that all our permits are lined up so that we can start that phase in 2024.
And that's my job right now, is completing all of those environmental studies, making sure that we have all of our federal, state, and local permit applications in, working with the communities to understand their concerns. And we're in the process now. So we have filed all our federal applications for the first project, and they're under active review. And so before those construction activities can happen offshore, we need to get those federal approvals. And right now we're on pace to do that at the end of next year.
I love the proactivity of this company, and also how you're really leaning into different stakeholder groups in terms of telling them what you're doing, even before they're asking, it seems. Okay, so I'll close with kind of a personal and professional question. You know, thinking that this project is going to be delivering electricity by 2027, 2028. Can you put your mindset 5 or 6 years from now and appreciate the mission that will be recognized standing here? You know, you said 2018 this started. So it's almost a 10-year journey. How's that going to feel?
Oh, I think it's going to be an amazingly exciting day. But it's not just really for me about seeing it in the next 5 years. It's knowing that that project is going to be operating for the next 30. I'm a mom. I have young kids. And I think part of my mission here is to create a more sustainable future for our children.
Yeah, leave the world in a little bit of a better place than how we found it when we started working. And we've been both working on this lease area since 2018. For us, it will feel incredibly personal when finally we start to deliver first clean renewable power to New Jersey. But yeah, it's not really about us here. It's about ultimately the state of New Jersey doing the right thing. And they're doing so many things right in terms of the sort of New Jersey master plan, in terms of getting to net zero by 2040. And, you know, more renewable power, I think, is a good thing. I think ultimately it will be mostly our kids that benefits from this. But hey, that's why we should get on with it.
All right, so this sounds like great. We look forward to hearing the progress along the way. Jennifer Daniels, Joris Veldhoven, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us, Bob.
All right, we'll be back right after this.
Okay, at AT&T, everyone gets our best deals on all smartphones.
Let me break it down. You got your new customers.
They get our best deals.
You got your existing customers.
They also get our best deals. Everyone gets the deals.
Questions?
Got it. But why did you use a permanent marker?
Because I want to make sure you remember. I'm gonna get a new whiteboard.
It's not complicated. Only AT&T gives everyone our best deals on every smartphone, like the Samsung Galaxy S21 5G for free.
Welcome back to NJBIA's Minding Your Business. I'm Bob Considine. Well, the kids from Generation Z are no longer kids anymore. In fact, they're graduating from college, being recruited for jobs, working full-time, and spending their salaries. So, if you're an employer or a marketer, how do you best appeal to Generation Z? Here with some of those answers is the author of the brand new book, Gen Z Graduates to Adulthood, Rutgers University School of Communication and Information Professor Mark Beal. Mark, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Bob.
All right, so You know, as a member of Generation Z myself, who hasn't aged particularly well, I know what Generation Z is, but tell the folks out there what it is.
Yeah, it's funny. It's a question I get asked all the time because the birth years are always something people are, want to know. So Pew Research Center sets the birth years for generations.
Right.
So they just set in the last 2 to 3 years the first birth year. So Generation Z official birth starting year is 1997.
Okay.
They won't set the last year for another few years. So I use 1997 to 2012, kind of a 15-year period.
Right.
So right now, as far as life stages, the oldest Gen Zers, as you just mentioned, have graduated college in the past year or 2 or 3. We have Gen Zers in college, high school, middle school, right on down to elementary school. Just about, if we go with the 2012 for now, 10, 11 years old is the youngest Gen Zers.
So basically what we're looking at here is they're no longer just students at this point.
That's the key, and that's the inspiration for this book, to your point. Gen Z graduates to adulthood.
Right.
It was probably August or September of last year, and I said, boy, 2022 is going to be a pivotal year because the oldest, if they were born in 97, they turned 25.
Right.
And so originally the title of the book was Gen Z Turns 25, and I spoke to some Gen Zers. They're like, terrible title. So we went with the Gen Z graduates to adulthood. But to your point, that was the whole idea. They're not just in school. They're actually 2, 3, some of them 4 years out of school. So as you said in the introduction, working full-time, collecting full-time salaries, making purchasing decisions about everything from even homes, leasing apartments, cars, credit cards, all those kinds of things. So it's, as you said, for a marketer or employer, Gen Z has got to become a priority if they weren't already.
Right. You mentioned early in the book, and it's very well done, this book. There was kind of a light bulb moment which set you on the path for this particular book. What was it?
Yeah, well, overall, the big light bulb moment was probably back in 2017, believe it or not. And that's when I came out of a course at Rutgers University. And I had just, been interacting and collaborating with a bunch of students who were at that time, would now be the oldest Gen Zers.
Right.
And I just had this moment of, millennials have been the focus for many brands. Because prior to Rutgers, I was in public relations and marketing and working with many different, category leading brands. And it was always, how do we get millennials? How do we engage millennials? How do we reach millennials? And so the light bulb moment then was, well, millennials have been the focus. Gen Z will become the focus come 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. So that was kind of the first light bulb moments, which I talk about in the book. And that set me on this, what's now almost a 5-6 year immersion into Generation Z, just researching, reading, interviewing, both in person, one-on-one, by Zoom, online surveys. And so it's been a fun 5 to 6 year journey of being an honorary member of Gen Z.
Good. You looked the part for sure. But I just did want to ask more about the process you just mentioned. I mean, you obviously go to students. Some are students, some are not.
Correct.
You come up to them with this idea of responding for this book.
Yeah.
What's the typical response? Is there skepticism? Is there, what am I getting paid? What is it?
Yeah, no, it's good question. And to your point, there is so this is the 6th book I've authored. 3 are focused on Gen Z. 1 was a career book. 2 were about high school and college students.
Right.
So I'm constantly coming up with ideas, just constantly, whether I'm out on a bike ride or whatever I'm doing, I'm always coming up with ideas. So this idea of Gen Z now, the oldest being adults, I had come up with, like I said, probably July, August of 2021. And I didn't act on it right away because I know once I commit to it, it takes over my life. It really does. So once I commit, so didn't act on it, but it was there. And then the more I was meeting with and speaking to Gen Zers who were working, I'm like, boy, this idea really has a lot of merit. And to your point, every book starts off a little bit differently, but with this one, I just crafted a relatively short email, and I sent it out to 100 plus Gen Zers who I knew were working, or there's a few that are graduating in the class of 2022 here in a few weeks. And you get a pretty good reaction right away, meaning, count me in. What do you need? I want to respond. Or, or maybe the opposite of, it's a terrible idea for a book. In this case, it was one after the other.
Right.
One after the other. Yes, I want to be part of it. Right. Count me in. What do you need? Okay. What are the questions? So you get a sense right there in the first, I hate to say 24 hours. I knew, if I sent out 100 emails, I had 20, 30, 40, 50 back. Yep, I'm in. What do you want from me?
Right.
So
let's, since this is a business show and we're going to hit on marketers and employers, I did want to, some of the results. We'll start off with Gen Z's advice to marketers on how to effectively engage them. What did you find in your response?
There's a couple of things. Okay. This generation Their media consumption is unprecedented, right? They don't watch network television. They don't watch cable television. They're not reading newspapers.
Right.
Newspapers do exist still.
Right.
And
they watch the show.
And they watch this show, of course. But they're watching shows like this.
Yeah.
The point is their media consumption is unprecedented. It's not what Gen Xers, it's not what millennials can. So if you're a traditional marketer, advertiser, you can't use the same channels. You can't use the same approach, 30-second spot. Probably is not going to reach them. Right. So that's the first thing, is you have to go to where they are. So I talk a lot about the big three: YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. If we had a fourth, we can add Snapchat. And there's other channels like that. None of these channels existed before 2000. These are all relatively new channels. Right. So that's kind of the first piece, right? Creating content that's going to reach this generation where they're looking for content. Second big insight, I would say, is they crave experiences. They crave access. They crave special events. So an example, not to plug any particular brand, but since 2018, Target launched a Gen Z incubator. They invited Gen Zers from across the country to connect and collaborate on ideas around marketing, ideas around new products, ideas around community initiatives. That's an experience. That's access. So if I'm one of those 100+ Gen Zers that's part of this think tank, I'm now more likely going to be really loyal and probably love the Target brand. Yeah. But any company, any organization, big or small, local or national, can create their own Gen Z think tank. You can tap into the local high school, the local college, the local community college. And I do recommend that to all organizations if Gen Z is a focus and a priority. But that idea of, give me an experience, give me something I can participate in, and then the beauty is share it on my social media, which is what they're going to do. Yep. So now all of a sudden they're promoting your brand or your organization to their followers. And their followers are mostly other Gen Zers. So that's a big insight that marketers, once they hear that, they say, okay, understand, it can't be just the traditional advertising, the traditional promotion.
And one thing, I'm going to read just a couple quick. Yeah. This was so well done the way you did it, because it's basically just snippets of their thoughts. Yeah. It's not a long context book, which I think is wonderful. But two quotes on this. Gen Z is all about authenticity. No one likes a try hard. We want everything to be genuine and natural, and we are more inclined to relate. That was from Summer D. And another quote along the same lines, Mark: just be genuine. Consumers can smell inauthentic pushes from brands. The market is inundated with that.
That comes up a lot. And where we can bridge that a little bit to, especially following 2020, the ideas of brands nowadays being more purposeful. So this generation, I call them, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, the purpose generation. They're looking to support brands that demonstrate a purpose other than just selling me something. Right. So Patagonia is a brand they love. Right. Now, Patagonia sells apparel, right? I
saw it in the book,
But Patagonia, if you look at their mission statement and even on Twitter, their description doesn't talk about apparel. It talks about like saving the planet or contributing to a better planet. That to them is, wow, that's genuine. That's authentic. That's a purpose I can get behind.
Right. So that's marketing. Yep. But when we're talking about employment and how Gen Z's advice to employers and how to recruit and retain them, is that the same thing? Is it all about being mission driven as well?
That's part of it, for sure. Okay. So Gen Zers are looking to work for employers that actually have a purpose than just, let's make a profit, right? Of course, you still have to generate revenue and make a profit, but what is your higher purpose? And we're seeing more and more companies, again, since the milestone events of 2020, realize they do have to have a purpose. And a lot of them are looking inside and saying, well, what is our purpose? What is our higher purpose? So that is part of it. But the other part, which is really interesting, I'll do a survey with Gen Zers and I'll say, what are the most important qualities in a future employer? And things that were important to my generation, competitive pay, competitive benefits, all important. Right. But at the top of the list, at about 35, 36%, somewhere in there, I'm looking for a corporate culture of diversity, inclusion, and a third word I like to use, belonging. I want to go somewhere where I actually belong. I feel included. I'm not just a cog in a machine. And I always say, if they go and they think that's what they're going to find, and maybe they don't, they'll be quick to move on to somewhere else where they can find it.
Yeah, we definitely have. It's funny you mentioned that was exactly the statistic from this beautiful book that I was going to pose. A corporate culture of diversity and inclusion, 34% is tops for Gen Zers. Competitive salaries, 27%. Competition benefits, 24%. 4-day work week, 22%. And the ability to work from anywhere. And I'm wondering 13%. I'm wondering if that has a lot to do with what we've just experienced over the past couple of years.
Yeah, so things have changed. We all know that, no matter what generation we're from.
Right.
Gen Zers, as I like to say, the pandemic occurred during their most formative year. So at that time, 2020, most were still in school. A couple were out. So they're, college, high school, things that we all enjoyed, milestones, actually attending a graduation ceremony. Didn't happen for them. Having internships, all got canceled. Getting a job when I graduated, not for those 2020 grads. It didn't happen in May, June, July, August. Some of them waited till the following January to get a job. So all those things, that's contributed a lot to the purpose, but it's also contributed to the fact that, I've demonstrated I can actually work pretty well from home.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily need to commute into the big city 5 days a week. Right. And even those in school, in the classroom, have experienced that as well, because we shifted right away to remote learning. So yeah, it's playing a factor, and I'm seeing it play out now.
Oh, yeah.
I have a lot of students graduating in 2022 who are, interviewing, and the preference I think right now is what I call a hybrid. I don't mind going in a couple days a week, but I'd like that ability to actually work remotely maybe 3 days a week. I'm hearing from some older Gen Zers, so those who've been out in the workforce 2 or 3 years, who've reached out and said, we've been remote for 2 years. Looks like they want me to be back 4 or 5 days a week. I'm not going back. Now, I don't think that's just Gen Z. I think that's across generations. Right. But so we're at an interesting time here in the workplace. Yeah. And if companies of all sizes are going to force you to return, let's just say 4 or 5 days, I think they're going to find a lot of people exiting and looking for companies, because there's a lot of companies now that have gone the opposite way where they're all remote, right? Where you don't go in at all. So that's why I said that hybrid of a little bit of in the office and home seems to be the middle ground.
Okay. You also have a chapter, Mark, on societal issues. What did you find on that?
If there's 65 or so adult Gen Zers who are in this book, it's about that. Yeah. I would say more than 50%, the number one issue, the number one priority, it's mental health. I think as a society, mental health over the last couple of years has become less of a taboo topic. I mean, I just point back to the Olympics in 2021. Michael Phelps on the air every night on NBC, almost like a commercial for mental health. Mm-hmm. Then you've got Simone Biles pulling out because of mental health. On the tennis court, Naomi Osaka.
Right, sure.
And so I think that's helped a lot because it's made it more of an open dialogue and discussion more acceptable. And so for Gen Zers, they say, yeah, it's really important to me.
Right.
I do want to talk about it. Interesting point, going back to the employer. I'm hearing more and more Gen Zers, as they're getting, so the class of 2022, as they're securing their jobs, and they maybe call me and say, hey, I got the job, and I've got this and that, and they're like, I was really excited to hear I have mental health days. It's a benefit. Now, mental health days didn't exist 10, 15, 20 years ago. Sure. Maybe it was called sick days or PTO days. Right. But they actually love that their employers are offering them mental health days. So again, there's another thing that employers should understand, that's something Gen Z says, wow, that's pretty valuable. I like that. Yeah. Compared to when I say, well, what about the 401k? I don't know about the 401k, but the mental health day. So that's what's resonating with them.
Yeah, and we hear that all the time from our employers, that they want to focus more on the health, the mental health. Lastly, Mark, Gen Z on their aspirations over 10 years, the next 10 years. I'm just going to start with a quote on this. Okay. In the next 10 years, I hope to establish myself in a career that I am passionate about, that changes people's lives for the better, and that I am successful in. Once I am established in my career, I hope to travel more, buy a house, get married, and start a family. That's from Antonia A. And what I love about this quote, Mark, is, we see a lot of change in this book over, things how we may have just responded differently at our age.
Sure.
But for this one, it's kind of the same from when we were.
Yeah. So what was interesting about that was kind of the last section, and where that question came from. One of the last keynote speeches I delivered to a company in December was very simply, where's Gen Z going to be in 10 years? I couldn't answer the question.
Yeah.
And I said, let me ask them.
Right.
So that was the question, was just, where do you want to be in a decade? Right. And to your point, of the 60 plus responses I got, none of them said something like, I want to be a billionaire. Yeah. None of that was that. It was more this, I would say, well-rounded, kind of living my best life, if that's the way to say it. So work, family, travel, that work-life balance. It was a lot more of that.
Okay.
And it was also kind of, and I think you got a little bit of the essence of that too, it was like, I also want to be kind of helping others and doing good and contributing to a better world. So that's the consistent theme.
Right. Well, Mark, this book is really well done. Again, it's Gen Z graduates to adulthood. And I should mention one other thing. You do have a great glossary in there for us who are I'm not really Gen Z.
Yeah.
But I think one of the terms in that book is, this book is fire. And that means anything that looks good, sounds good, is good, or really cool. So well done, Mark.
Thank you very much, Bob.
This is available on Amazon.
Yes.
And this is Mark Beal. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. And thank you for joining us on NJBI is Minding Your Business. We'll see you next time.